when the event starts, to have you all both mute yourselves and turn off your video, as this leads me to the second element that I want to touch on, is that we're thrilled to have Melanie Swartz here today, who is an Asl interpreter. Will be with us for the duration of the event, and it'll be easier for you to see her box will essentially be bigger if everyone who is not talking has the camera off. So with that being said, I would like to welcome Leslie Daniels, who is the author of Cleaning Navajo's House. We are so thrilled to have her today in conversation with Josh Swiller, whose new book, Bright Shining World, just came out. And we're so excited. It's one of our best-selling books, and we're so excited for everyone to read it and for you guys to hear what Josh has to say about it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Isabella, and I am delighted to be here. I think I've known about Josh and this book from, as I was saying, before it was born. So to be here on this occasion of its birth, the week of its birth, is just tremendously exciting and gratifying. I think as a writer, there's so much solitude and actual loneliness in the work. And one of the gifts of it is the company we get to keep, because writers are extraordinary companions, both in life and afterwards, because we get to read their books. And I'm noting this because we, as a community, lost Alison Lurie today, a tremendous writer and an Ithacan and beloved of so many people. And I hope you check out her work. So without further ado, I am going to invite Josh to read from the beginning of the book, and then we have some questions. And if there are questions that you have for afterwards for Josh, you can put them in the chat and we will see them at the end. So thank you. If you turn your videos off if you can, and do speaker view or do gallery view. No, I think you want to do gallery view, and then you'll see Melanie and Josh and me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. I think everyone can tell just from your introduction what a great and profound and empathic help you were on this whole journey. And I can't thank you enough. And to everyone from out of Ithaca, I just want to say a few things about Buffalo Street Books, which is hosting this. So Buffalo Street Books is this lovely little bookstore that a couple of years ago, or maybe longer now, was going out of business. And so the community got together and bought the bookstore. And so it's a community-owned bookstore. And it's wonderful. And it's nice to be doing this for a company that wants to sell books and that doesn't want to colonize Mars or whatever they're up to at Amazon these days. And yes, Barack Obama did beat me out on sales, even though I'm local, but I still just really thankful to this wonderful bookstore. So if you're ever in town, please stop by, because one day this pandemic will be over. And I look forward to seeing all of you then. But first, before that, so this is the book. It has been a long time writing it. So yeah, I will just dive in with the first few pages, and then we'll see what happens. So, Bright Shining World. Rise and shine, Wallace. My father woke me with that hard, open-handed push on the face he liked. I blinked awake. He said, "We're leaving." I'd been having a dream about trees that could communicate with each other by flying box cuts. They discussed the wind. They waved to clouds. Then a pack of aphids, falcons, and men with knives descended on them, and they screamed. Again. Why couldn't I just dream about sex? It's still dark out, I said. Dad flicked on the lamp. Get your stuff together. We've got a long drive. We were living in a 2-bedroom rental with walls made out of stale crackers. None of the overhead lights worked. In the kitchen, duct tape held together 2 cabinets, 3 windows, and 4 drawers. I couldn't tell you if the decrepit white stove was gas or electric, or if it even worked. We'd never turned it on. I already packed up the kitchen, Dad said. That meant he grabbed his bottle opener. Where are we going? I asked. New York. Shoot, that was 1,000 miles away. I'm presenting my science project third period tomorrow, I protested. Or today, whenever it is, with Nicole. With nods and single eyebrow raises, my father had approved of Nicole. Maybe mentioning her now would change his mind about leaving, and we could stay in Kentucky a little longer. Until the weekend, say, when Nicole and I might go camping along the Cumberland River. Or if not until then, maybe we could stay just one more day. Just one. Because there was no question in my mind the announcement to Nicole of my sudden departure would leave 2 emotional last glances. A ride out on the dirt road behind Bueller's pasture to that whispery grove, unbuttoned clothing, breathless quivers, breathful quivers, all different kind of quivers. And then that's not happening, my father said. The science project. You can't wait a day? Let's go. I sat up. But we're going to present on local pollution. Hard on it all afternoon. Actually, we had mostly been fooling around Nicole's hand-me-down Civic. About Jack Duke and how it's poisoning the river. Did you know not a single black-throated blue warbler has been seen in this county since the plant had that accident? The one right before we got here? Dad paused, checking through a closet. Black-throated blue warbler? Black-throated blue warbler. It's like a regular blue warbler, but with more black. Go apart.
Josh, about his book and his
You might want to mute yourself, Ross, but thank you. I liked Nicole. She was all county in swimming, had chlorine-bleached hair and lats for days. Sometimes she spoke so fast she lost track of what she was saying, and kissing her felt a bit like an X-wing starfighter diving into the canal in the Death Star. Her braces were that stupendous. Yeah, she did get a bit weirded out whenever I shared my deep thoughts. And she made her own herbal teas that had pieces of grass floating in them and tasted like butt. But these kind of things can be forgiven. And we were almost past the we shouldn't be doing this phase of hooking up. And the next phase of hooking up, the let's do this phase, I'd only been there once, and that was by accident. I'm falling in love, I said. Dad snorted. You've known her 4 weeks, Wallace. It's not love. It might be. You don't even know what love is. Well, how can I when you rip it out of my hands? Dad was quiet at that. He was filling a trash bag with my clothes, or perhaps trash. Both tended to smell and to collect on the floor of my room. My life. A moldy pile in a Febreze commercial, a garbage bag thrown in the back of a truck, love crushed by fate. It was hopeless. I had one thing left to hit him with. This is not what Ma would want, I said. You're wrong, he countered. This is exactly what she'd want. She'd want me to be alone. She'd want me to do my job. That's it. Dad hated when I brought up Ma. It was a direct circuit to the pain center of his brain. I'd say to him, hey, I had a dream about Ma on a midnight ferry boat. And Dad would grab his head like spiders were laying eggs in there. Then he'd give me a 20 to disappear. But not this time. I felt a sudden gust of fear. What the hell was happening in New York? AC is cranked, Dad said. Beef jerky is bought. That gross honey mustard kind you like. You can sleep in the truck. Thank you.
It's so fun to hear it in your voice.
It feels, from my perspective, it feels like, but okay, I'll take it.
Well, I know, having read early drafts of this book, that this central character, Wallace, started out as an existential detective. And that's not still in the book as a quality, as a description. But there is still the experience of him discovering the world. And I wanted to know if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. In the early drafts, Wallace was, or called himself, an existential detective, which is, it was very poorly defined, but he was basically asking questions of everything and wanting to know what was at the bottom of everything. And I think that came from my experience of growing up deaf in the hearing world. So Leslie, you've only known me since I've had an implant, but before I had an implant, I had hearing aids, and my hearing was much worse. As someone told me, I would have conversations with what I thought the other person was saying instead of what the other person was actually saying. And so a lot of my experience was trying to figure out what was being said. So I was constantly a detective, constantly feeling isolated and trying to figure out where the connection it was and trying to figure out what people really meant. And so that was part of Wallace's original incarnation. But then what's interesting, when I was trying to decide to get rid of it, I talked to my friend Jeff, who's on this call, and I was describing how being an existential detective is a deaf person's experience of high school. And he said, no, that's everyone's experience of high school, where you're trying to figure it out, where you're feeling isolated. And I thought that was helpful. Yeah. So. Someone muted you?
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to cut the feedback between you talking and me talking, but I won't make that mistake again. You know, you come from a tribe of therapists in some ways, and I come from a tribe of therapists. There's so much that's psychologically interesting about, there's so much reflection on consciousness and on the mind in this book. Could you talk, and yet it's for a young audience. Can you talk about that a little bit, about the decisions that went into that?
Yeah, you see someone says you look like Meryl Streep there.
I used to when I was younger. Well, to go back to the experience of being deaf growing up. So first you're trying to understand what everyone's saying, whether they're dangerous, what they're feeling, whether you should be afraid. And if it was my brothers, I should definitely have been afraid. But the other thing about deafness is it also pushed me to answer the question, what makes me feel okay? So if I'm in an environment where I can't hear anyone, what inside me makes that situation okay? I can just space out through life, or I can just keep working further inside to figure out what's okay in that situation and what is beautiful in that situation even. And so in a way, deafness was a spiritual teacher, and it still is. I like to say sometimes that silence is closer to me than God. It's there all the time. And
and it's always saying something new, very quietly, but new, sometimes not so quietly. But from an early age, I was always looking at things from a deeper point of view. And I think for years I felt ashamed of that almost. Like, why am I looking at things so deeply? Why can't I just, get my ride and my booze and have a good time? But so looking deeply. And then that led to a life where I spent many years as a serious meditation practitioner, which again was just sitting in silence, and many years as a craniosacral therapist, which is also a kind of teaching of silence, because you can't force healing on anyone. You can't force anything on anyone, really, but you can hold a space in which some beautiful things can emerge. And so in a way, I when I sat down to write this book, I wanted to get that across. It's tricky because spiritual practice, meditation practice is about the end of drama, the end of personal drama, about getting to a place where you don't get sucked into the old, problems and patterns, and you can get some distance. But then a novel is all about personal drama. It's the exact opposite thing. It doesn't work without personal drama. So it took me a long time to figure out how am I going to do this, and how can I get across these things that have given me solace for so long, and at the same time, have a good time.
This is a book, as a parent, I was always looking for books that would, first of all, be honest, and also have having a son. I have a son and a daughter. I would look for books that had a central character that was relatable, and Wallace has such amazing qualities. I can, now my son's too old for me to just hand him fiction and have him devour it. But I was thinking, what do you hope that a kid will get from this? And you decided to write for young audiences with this particular project, having written for adults before. What do you hope they get from your book?
Well, first, like you, I was looking for a book, so I wrote the book I was looking for. And one of the problems with spiritual books is they all start to get a little the same, a little preachy, and they'll have titles like, When the Leaf Falls, When the Heart is Tired, and you just and there's this place for that, and it's wonderful. But I think a really important part of wisdom, of mental health, of spiritual health, is to have fun, to have a sense of humor. And that doesn't mean to just, make great jokes, but to have a sense of play, to have space for spontaneity, to just to walk through the world like a 5-year-old child does. A 5-year-old child doesn't walk through the world going, damn, what did Trump do today? My 5-year-old child came home really happy today that he spelled daddy right. And, and then, that there was still snow on the ground here. And just to be amazed by this world. And we forget that, as we're trying to, there's so much going on that's, frightening and scary and, it feels like there's so much that's frightening and scary, and then there's a bigger pile of stuff that's frightening and scary, but we just won't even look at it. And that's what it feels like. And I feel that that's true, but it can't be the only truth. If we're gonna make the world better, we have to be all the time looking for what's beautiful about it and what's special about it and what's amazing about it. And that's something I wanted to get across to young readers, that, yeah, this world has problems, but you guys are awesome, and the world is awesome, and what's inside you is awesome and magnificent and surprising and can heal the world. Or not, but maybe.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's elements of, I guess you would call it magic. Maybe you'd call the book magic realism. I wouldn't call it science fiction, but there's certainly elements of world building in it. And you had to make a lot of very imaginative decisions about how you were going to solve things. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think it kind of relates to the last question. I think the word magic, first of all, is problematic, because the first thing that comes to mind is, where'd my card go? That kind of magic. But, the magic in the book is just that splendor, that awe that's there if we just look for it. And so there are magical elements, but there's actually a real logic to it, that everything that is seen out there is grounded in a psychological state or a spiritual state in a character. And so part of the way I figured out the problem of trying to tell a spiritual story in a dramatic book was to blow up what was in here 1,000 times the size, so that then it would become dramatic. And so that's part of what the magic is. And, growing up, with four senses, with this constant gift, I guess, but constant blinders that kind of force me to look inside, you really see that the inner universe is just as magical as the outer one, just as varied, just as incredible, just as enriching. And so again, with this book, I tried to get that across by blowing it up really big. What do they call it? Into, what's that kind of TV screen called? IMAX. Life IMAX. Yeah.
This question may be for me, but it's certainly for other people who have read the book or will read the book. It's extremely funny. There's like dry wit, there's farcical humor, there's all kinds of different humor. How hard did you work to make the book funny? I mean, how important was that to you?
First thing my brother Zev said to me was, "This book is funnier than you are." So I'll put that.
That's nice.
Yeah, I have three brothers, and they will all say I'm the least funny. Though I feel like I've moved my way up to third place at least. Take that, Ari. But so humor was always really important growing up. And again, I think humor is it's not just making jokes. It's a sense of play and possibility and amazement. And so that's the feeling I was really going for. But definitely, I think it's so important. I love to read humor. I love to watch good humor. There was one scene I'm remembering. One way I worked the humor was I would put the characters in situations and see what they would do. And I remember there was one situation I waited 2 years for the right line. That hope I'm not giving away too much, but Wallace goes for a swim with the girl he likes, naked in the middle of the night, and they get out of the lake. And for 2 years, I was thinking, what would a teenage boy say to a teenage girl in this situation? And then, and then you just have to hold it open and wait. And when it finally came, I cracked myself up. So that was a good sign. But yeah, I think I've said this in other places. If I'm going to read a book and a novel, and there isn't, sorry, I just saw some of the chat comments and lost my train of thought.
I haven't been looking, but we should clearly save time for the questions, I guess, that are on mine.
Yeah. I just feel when I read a book and I'm reading someone, and if they've thought long and hard about life and they can't find some joy in it, or at least some kindness in it, I can't read it. And there are a lot of writers like that, where maybe they get sucked into their intellectual structures and ideas, or maybe they just hate everyone. But I can't read that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about that. So many YA books, I think, have really stock characters, and it may be that the setting of high school invites that, but I think you do something very extraordinary, engaging with stereotypes, but using them in remarkably different ways. And I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
It's interesting. I've gotten some reviews saying these characters are so cliched, which kind of cracks me up, because I started with the archetypes. Like you said, it's a very imaginative world. So I started with some archetypes to kind of ground the reader. Like, if you have an imaginative world and the characters are like, a talking duck and a walking, talking unicorn or something, that's not, where's the reader gonna find order? So I started with, the bully, the football bully, the queen of the school, the nerds, the gruff father. I started with the archetypes, but then they're actually kind of like Trojan horses, because no one is who they appear. And that's another thing I wanted, the book to get across. If we just look at people from their package, we miss what's inside them. And maybe it wasn't clear enough in that, because some reviewers are like, all these cliched people. Oh, well. But not you people. You will like it.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's so not a standard book. I mean, there's so much more imagination in it. There's so much more ideas on all kinds of levels than I think people are led to expect from a YA book, even though there's incredible writing going on in that sphere. And I want to come back to why you decided to write. I mean, did you decide this story needed to be told as a YA story, or did you decide you wanted to write something to reach this audience And I note, not to be obnoxious, but I note that, you started writing it perhaps at the beginning of fatherhood for yourself. And did that figure into thinking about what you wanted to do next as a project?
So I wrote a memoir a couple lifetimes ago about my experience in the Peace Corps. And I wrote that book to understand what happened to me in the Peace Corps, not to really, tell everybody, but to further understand what I went through. And so one aspect of it was I wanted to understand what had happened in high school, what I had been feeling in high school, and then with my almighty author power to rewrite the story a little bit. So that was one aspect of it. Another aspect of YA, YA requires, I feel, and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but it requires you have a plot that moves. You have strong characters that you relate to. And generally I'm finding not always, a sense of optimism and hope. And those are three things that I liked a lot and I wanted to see if I could play with. I think literature sometimes I get burned out on, where I can get into writing beautiful sentences and talking about how, I don't know, how dark and painful people can be. But YA literature or YA books are a little bit more bright and shining, you could say.
I know that there are questions, and one of them is about how long the book took to write and what the editing process was like, which is, that's a good question, and I didn't have that on my list. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had the idea for this book. I remember it was like a Memorial Day weekend, so it was probably like 7 years ago. I wrote down the idea of the book. And then I spent a year working on it, and, off and on in between, raising kids and having a job. So I spent a year working on it, send it to a friend to read, and he said, never show that to anybody before you work on it some more. So I spent another year working on it, and then I sent it to 5 agents, and they all turned it down. But one said, why don't you work on this? So I spent another year working on it, and I sent it to 10 agents, and they all turned it down. They're like, yeah. And then I spent another year working on it, and sent it to 30 agents, and one said, I like it, even though on the email to him I called him the wrong name, so I'm always grateful. But he said, I like it, but you need to work on some things. And actually, he was the one who said the existential detective thing can go. So we worked on it together for, 6 months. And then he sent it out to 10 publishers, and they all turned it down. But one of them gave me some notes. So I worked on it a little more. Then he sent it to 5 more publishers, and they all turned it down. But one of them gave me some notes, and I fixed those notes, and we sent it back to her, and she bought it. So, yeah, easy. Yeah, that's the way to make the money. But I really feel it was a story I wanted to tell. It was characters I enjoyed hanging out with. It was, it's a learning experience. You don't write a book knowing how to write a book. You learn how to write a book. And so learning how to write tension and suspense and humor and pacing, yeah, it was wonderful, wonderful time. And I feel a lot of people who are on this Zoom kind of know I've been working on it so long, and I can feel how happy they are for me, or maybe just relieved that I'm finally done.
Well, if you were going to have an ordinary publishing career, you'd set out to write a YA book, and then you'd write another YA book, and then you'd write another one after that for the same audience, and you would make your agent a lot of money, and everybody'd be like, oh yeah, that Swiller, he's a YA. But instead, you wrote this extraordinary memoir first that has nothing to do with this book. They're both incredibly well written, very, very interesting, but the overlap is it's only in that it's you that wrote it. And you're working on something else now that's not necessarily an obvious follow-up book. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or maybe not.
No, it's okay. No, I to market the book, I was told you need to get active on social media. So I'm on Twitter now, and I'm following all these YA writers, and it's exactly like you say, and they all have these trilogies, and they all have names like Bone and Sword, Blood and Sand, and seriously, and and yeah, that's not me. But I kind of like to write to understand things, and in a way, understanding things helps to heal them, helps to to heal them. And so the next book that I'm working on is about deafness, and I took the aspect of deafness and put it in a very stark environment, and to see what it does there and what happens there. Deafness is, it's, to me, it was the experience of silence and isolation. To other people who have grown up in the deaf community, it's completely different. It's an experience of a culture that's so connective, it's almost overwhelming. And it's a lot of different things. And one of the things it's a cut the bullshit thing. For me to have a conversation with someone, I have to look in their eyes, in their face, and I appreciate it if they look in mine. And most conversations don't happen that way. So it's a no filter zone. And again, I could probably just write this up in an essay, but I wanted to see, how would this work in a novel? And as you get older, you wake up earlier and earlier, and I can either check the sports scores, or I don't know, wash the dishes, or daydream a novel.
Well, so there's a question from my beloved colleague Jody Lisberger, who's so thrilled on this, who said, will you write a novel with a deaf character in it? You said, is that what you're working on now? There's a character.
Actually, every character in the novel is deaf. And they're in, one of the things about deafness and all disabilities, through the unheard and other things, I've gotten to know many people in the disabled community, though that's not the right word, differently abled community, and many incredible, lawyers, doctors, explorers. But there is one aspect of it where without hearing, we are a little bit at the mercy of the hearing, and, or at the mercy of technology, or at the mercy of laws protecting our rights. And so what if all of that is gone? And that was curious to me. So I haven't figured out the happy ending yet.
Right.
But that's kind of writing a book. Writing a book is coming up with these problems and then seeing if you can write your way out of them.
Right. I noticed that there are a lot of kind of comments in the chat about the relationship between Wallace and the father. And I don't know if I'm selling you out here to say you want to talk about You know, my mother is also on this Zoom chat. And I just have to say, I took delight in. I have a fabulous mother, and I took delight in writing superbly narcissistic and nasty mothers in all my stuff. So for freedom there. So your turn.
I just want to point out to everyone that Leslie's mother is 98 years old, sharper than a tack, and is the matriarch of a family of Pennsylvania voters that mailed in their ballots and turned the tide. They personally did it. She is phenomenal. If you ever get to meet her, you're lucky. Well, look, I'll be honest. People know me, know I have not always had the easiest relationship with my father. You know, at some point, you realize all your shit is your material. So, you know, and you know, I wanted to work with that and see what could come out of it. And another thing I think is important, or for me as a reader, is to find, everyone thinks they're good. You know, everyone thinks they're good people working hard. Everyone feels misunderstood. Everyone feels, you know, the terror that they're not getting life right. Everyone feels that. And so all the characters in the book, I wanted to make sure that that part of them was clear, that it wasn't from a judgmental place of, I'm settling scores, but just trying. But at some point, you know, it's not me and it's not my father anymore. It's characters in a book. And because of that, the main character can be a lot wittier and more charming than I am.
And there's also this very interesting generational divide where that's so, I don't want to say too much, but that it's analogous with how our generation, my generation, left the earth, the next generation, and how they're dealing with it, because it's I found it extraordinary, because I read early drafts of it, that this book was done and then came out in this particular moment in history where the world as we know it has changed completely, and we're having to engage with it in a completely different way. And it seems like there's so much of that in the book.
Well, we do. You have to remember that there is no better world.
Right.
This is it. We live in the best of all possible worlds. Yeah, and when we get focused on, you know, all the problems of the world and forget the beauty of the world, then the work of fixing it becomes grim. It becomes, and you know, we have to do the work. We have to fight. We have to protest. We have to have rallies. We have to do all that. But we have to appreciate it, and appreciating the world and appreciating ourselves, they go together. You know, if we're gonna say the world is wonderful, but don't mind me, I'm just here, just all that's not how it works. The world is wonderful, and you are wonderful, and we are wonderful, and that's something. You know, I can't tell people how to get bills passed in the Senate or how to, you know, convert sunlight into cars that drive, but I could teach a little bit about how to nourish the inner shining world a little bit.
Yeah. There's a couple of really interesting questions. The most recent one is, how do you deal with the tendency of the deaf community to judge and ostracize anyone who speaks? I admire that in you a lot. It's something I struggle with. You seem at peace with using your voice publicly more than I do for that reason.
I think, again, that comes back to, you have to, step back from what other people expect of you or what other people think and what's inside of you. So if the judgments of other people are bothering you, so what inside you is so bothered by it? What needs their approval to such a degree, And that's hard, because when you're deaf, you really seek connection in a deep way. I mean, I feel so blessed to have met my wonderful, incredible, beautiful, brilliant wife, Leah, who gets this and who is all about deep connection and is all about healing on the deep levels. I'm sorry, it's not easy.
Yeah. Got lucky. So you have this extremely full life with, really interesting practice professionally and young family, and you can tell now that writing is not going to be the get rich quick thing that you thought it might be. But so why do this? Why do this?
I don't, something inside wants to come out. I think it's good to let it out. I think it's important to nourish our gifts. It's another way of saying thanks to the world. And like you said, I have 2 young boys, and I want them to feel they can chase their dreams and do whatever. And then I can show this some book. I could show them this book, and they'll be like, "That was your dream, writing that?" But for that reason, it was. What's that saying by? It's like I'm blanking on the name. The Roman philosopher. If you share what's inside of you, it will save you. If you don't share what's inside of you, it will destroy you. Something like that. So I think it's something wanted to come out, so I got out of the way as much as I could.
Yeah. Do you have, when you're writing, do you read in a particular way? Do you read other YA books and thinking about this? Or there, how do you handle that?
Well, I'm always reading. And, the taste always changed, based on, sometimes a book is good. If a book is good, a book is good. When I was writing this book, I got into an author named Joe Abercrombie, who writes what's called grim, dark fantasy. So basically, if you took the character of Wolverine from the X-Men and you put him in the Middle Ages, fighting battles with swords and stuff, and it sounds crazy, but he was a brilliant writer, and he wrote battle scenes so well, and tension so well, and humor so well. And I think writing that might have seeped into my book a little too much. It's got some violence in it, I guess. A little. But then also, I love writers who just can make a sentence sing, who just say something so beautifully, you just go, yeah. I love how writers describe the sun, metaphors for the sun. What can they come up with? The sun slid down the sky like spit stuck to a wall, stuff like that. I remember that, and just reading and just being inspired to look at the world in a certain different way by lines like that. But that kind of writing, I would say, it's not a good idea to read it when you're just starting, because when you're just starting, you gotta put in the bones of the house before you can paint the walls. So you gotta get the framework up, the scaffolding.
So do you think like that as far as when you're writing? Do you think like, what's the overall, what's the plot? You think very structurally about what you're working on?
This one I did. This one drove me crazy because I think in some ways it was too ambitious. There's a lot happening in a certain way, even though it's in some ways a very kind of easy book to read. It's not, full of big words. But so this one I had to really wrestle with structure. And so I thought for this next one, actually, I'd try something different and deliberately shy away from, when my mind would go, oh, well, what happens if, this and this get in the way? How would they get out? No. That's too complicated. Let's just go straight through it. But everybody's different, I guess.
This book is the characters are so invested, and they're so alive, and they're so interesting. And, Maya do extremely well. If they came back to you and said, Josh, we want you to write another Wallace book, would you do it?
Yeah. I was thinking more if, Netflix came back to me and said, hey, we want another Wallace book, I'd probably be like, you know what? I feel there's one inside of me that wants to come out. The Wallace voice, he is a teenager's voice. And I did want to break from that. I loved his voice. It's fun, it's playful. But there are other voices. It's one that, while we're here on this planet, getting to explore different things. I think I'm lucky that, I have this other career that I love, doing craniosacral therapy, and that, keeps the roof over my head. So I don't have to think of this as, in as a monetary, financial way all the time. More just in a lottery ticket way.
Let me just see if are there other questions? I think. So somebody asked about the mother.
What about the mother? The mother.
Okay, and somebody, if you want to pass on that one, who is the inspiration behind Brad Stone? You don't have to.
That would be my older brother Ari. He was just an incredible bully growing up. He was just like the most rudest, self-absorbed, just brutal human being to be with, and it just took me a lot of work to figure out how to deal with that.
I don't think he's on this call, so you can say whatever you want. And no, actually he is. I liked Brad.
Even with him, I started him out with the archetype, but then I was curious, how can he grow?
Yeah.
He was, sometimes when there was a time I was working on the book and I felt like, and see if you can guess what this time period is, but I felt, well, Wallace is kind of like a Bernie Sanders stand-in, and Megan Rose is a Hillary Clinton stand-in, and Brad Stone is Donald Trump. And so some of their dynamics, that was kind of in my head. So that was, that kind of dates how old the book was. But then after a while, it gets, I wanted to, at least in my book, see that the people in that Brad Stone community could change. That's probably the most magical realism thing in the book. but it's my book, so.
Yeah. Well, while you were writing this book, there was so much that came out into the just the regular everyday reading that I might do in the New York Times or something about trees, both from the scientific world and from the fictional world. Overstory was published, but other amazing books about trees and communication. And I was wondering, I mean, that seemed absolutely prescient, but I wondered how you arrived at that.
Well, that aspect of the book came from, I actually spent about 6 months in the Amazon jungle in Peru with training and studying with shamans and with the jungle and learning the power of the jungle and and its medicines and just seeing the relationship they had with nature there. Less of I am a person with the answers and you are a tree, but more of we're just one energy, floating around, communicating, talking to each other. So that aspect of it was very, very nice. It's something I carry with me now, 10 years later. I live out in the woods. I live on a dirt road. We have a Danby State Forest behind us, which is quite lovely during hunting season, which just ended, I think. But yeah, a lot of gunshot. And then we have just woods everywhere. And, you start hanging out with trees and you notice you feel different under different trees. You feel some trees may have maybe more of a male energy, some more of a female energy. Just hang out and just go with it. Why not? Go with it and see what comes out and write it down.
Yeah. This is it. That's a lovely answer. There's a question that for a deaf guy, you've got an extremely good ear. Can you talk about how you hear language? And I was going to say something about the dialogue in the book is so incredibly good.
Thank you.
Talk about both of those things.
I don't know. I do think as, I learned language through my eyes, through reading books. I started reading when I was 3, read all the time. I'm so old, there weren't captions when I was growing up, so there was watching TV wasn't that much fun. Although when I did watch it, I would have to make up the entire plots. So Gilligan's Island would be on, and I would have no idea what was going on, so I was just trying to make it up. But then I learned through reading, and I always liked books with good dialogue. I was drawn to them. Books, dialogue, that can move a story and show a character and not feel like it's being orchestrated, but just spontaneously flowing. And so that's something I always liked, and just a lot of hard work, mostly. And also hard work and also getting a clear sense of the character speaking. And that enabled the dialogue to pick it up. But I do have, like I said, I'm the least funny of my brothers, so once in a while I'd be really stuck and I'd call up Zev, who, he's got the crown, and I'd be like, what's something funny here that my character can say? And he'd be like, really, you're calling me at 11 at night to talk about this? But then he'd give me something funny.
That's wonderful. Well, I think we're kind of out of time, but I wonder if people want to put their cameras back on so they can see each other and chat for a little bit. Yes.
I don't know. Sounds nice.
Josh, it's really, really good.
Thank you. Maybe I'll leave gallery view. Hey.
Can we? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice to see you. Family.
I see you, Mark. Hi, Irene. Rachel, hi. David, Diane, good to see you. Sitting up. Hi, Roberta. The shark is here. Hey, oh wait, I have another window. Oh, okay. Hi, Ariana, Hank and Andrea, Tom, Rafi, Richard, thank you so much, really. Everyone here, thank you, thank you. It's, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here today. And a reminder that if you haven't yet, for some reason, picked up Josh's book, you can do so at Buffalo Street Books. If you order online, I think Josh is still willing to come in to sign copies. So if you want a signed copy, you can just order.
Personalized and
personalized, yes, personalized signed copies, even better. So if you want one and you want to order online, if you're not, whether you're in Ithaca or if you're not in Ithaca, just put it in your order comments that you would like a signed, personalized copy, and we'll be able to get that to you. And with that being said, thank you so much to Josh and Leslie for being here and having this incredible discussion. And thank you so much to Melanie for interpreting for us today, as it was such a huge help and such an amazing thing to have today. And yeah, thank you everyone so much for being here today, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.